Also, later in the next hour, I get so many emails. I get so many calls. I've had people in the office last week asking me about it, dealing with pole shift. And yes, the poles of the planet have moved and are always moving a little bit, but now they're moving a lot more than they've been recorded in the last 80 years or so, since the 1920s, when the establishment, the scientific establishment, around 1910, 1920, you see the studies begin following the poles. They've really only got about 50 years or so of accurate readings, but in the last 50 years, these are the biggest movements ever recorded. So I've done a lot of research on it, but I dove back into it last night and this morning, and we have an article up at prisonplanet.com, linked through to the salem-news.com, magnetic polar shifts causing massive global superstorms. And there is some evidence to that, that it's confirmed it's shifted quite a bit compared to previous readings. But it's not like a complete flip where suddenly the pole is in, South Africa and Brazil, where suddenly, the whole planet moves around, or the magnetic field moves around, because the moving of the magnetic field can also change the planet's overall orientation of the sun. And yes, that would be a cataclysm, and scientists do believe that sometimes the Earth has massive pole shifts, but no doubt it's moving right now. Every year in the last 12 years or so, I wasn't hearing about this my first 4 or 5 years on air, but in the last 10, 12 years, I constantly hear, next week, pole shift, next month, and people set dates and never give any proof, and it creates all this hysteria, and people say, why aren't you covering it? Why aren't you going over it? Why aren't you discussing it? Well, I'll spend 10 minutes or so next hour getting into pole shift, and you're welcome to call in and talk about pole shift, or even more importantly, big changes that are always going on in the sun and its magnetic field bathing the Earth in solar radiation, the main driver, obviously, of the climate of the planet, even though the UN says the sun has no effect on the climate or weather. If you believe that, I got a bridge I'm happy to sell you on the moon. Magnetic polar shifts causing massive global superstorms. And here's Fox News. Magnetic North Pole shifts forces runway closures at Florida airport. Continuing, we'll go over the overall cataclysmic pole shift hypothesis and what people are saying. Here's another one. Scientist gives human extinction warning. Here's another one. Why is BGS reestablishing a magnetic observatory on South Georgia? That's out of the British Geological Survey. Also, a report here from NASA. Magnetic portals connect Earth to the sun. Satellites spy changes to Earth's magnetic field. Scientific American. This is just some of what we're going to be covering. And I think the bottom line here is we don't know what's happening. Change is the only constant in this universe. And hence, on terra firma, our little blue-green jewel orbiting the sun 2/3 of the way out on the spiral arm of the Milky Way galaxy. And I wonder if we could pay Al Gore or the UN or the Rothschilds a tax, and they'll wave a magic wand and stop any pole shifts from happening, or asteroids from hitting us, or the sun shooting out a massive coronal ejection directly at the Earth and blowing out all of our communications. I mean, we know these events happen. We know that cataclysmic asteroid impacts happen routinely. They estimate now not every million years or so, but perhaps every 10,000 years. And that's why many other previous human civilizations going back over 6,000 years just disappear. I don't know. Do we have the technology to put weapon systems in space? Stop it. Probably. But the establishment will then just use those and wheel those guns around, those missiles around on the Earth. And the globalists have been caught admitting they want to use an anti-asteroid weapon system as a cover for further weaponizing space. So these are all issues we deal with, but that's just part of life. Driving down the highway is dangerous. Swimming in a swimming pool or a lake is dangerous. Walking around, in the woods is dangerous. You could, get attacked by a bear or a wolf or a rattlesnake. Anytime the government sells you that you should not ever be in any danger and that they're going to protect you, A, under law, they don't have to protect you. B, historically, they don't want to protect you. They want to feed off of you. And it's like that woman I covered 2 weeks ago here in Austin getting a $48,000 settlement with the Travis County. She's out with a bike riding group on rural one-lane each way 2-lane road. She's on the shoulder, the broken shoulder, and flips off the bike and broke her jaw, and they settled with her. You know, the message is, you fall off your bicycle, you sue the government. Or, oh my gosh, the sea levels are going to rise from carbon dioxide, which, by the way, they're not rising. Let's pay Al Gore some money. It's a joke. So I'm going to get into that coming up as well. Okay, next hour I will get into pole shift. How big of a threat is it? Is it real? Yes. The question is it about to happen? It is moving at a record pace right now, the North and South poles. That is confirmed. But are we going to have a massive pole shift? If we do have one, it's going to be cataclysmic. You can better believe that you're going to see some fireworks if that happens. It appears from human history that there have been a lot of cataclysms in the past, but obviously there isn't good record keeping, especially after the library at Alexandria was burned. But we're going to be covering that coming up in the next hour. I'm going to get into some of the other big economic developments that are taking place. But right now, let's take calls. I'd love to hear from you. Donovan in Florida, you're on the air. Welcome.
Alex, how you doing, buddy?
Good.
There's a couple things I'd like to point out. I'm glad you're talking about pole shift today, because I'm driving through Florida here where they recently had to recalibrate the compass headings at Tampa International, and there might be more to follow. So the pole's definitely shifting, more in some areas than others. But I think the important thing is maybe it goes to show something solar-related. And that may tie into, these weather anomalies we're having as well. And what, well,
I'm sure if you just pay some carbon taxes and we shut down some power plants, we'll all be safe. But being serious here, here's Fox News. This is back from January 6th, so this is a month ago. And it says, magnetic North Pole shifts, forces runway closures at Florida airport. The planet's northern magnetic pole is drifting slowly but steadily towards Russia and is throwing off planes in Florida. We'll cover that more, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah, it does shift slowly over time, but it has accelerated quite a bit the past, I don't know how many years, but it's started to accelerate.
Well, you know what's funny? I remember 16 years ago, 12 years ago, hearing it, but not really paying a lot of attention to the last 10 or so, that on 2012 there'd be a big pole shift. And it is kind of creepy that we're seeing record movements in the polls right as we approach it. I mean, it is creepy. And we know the globalists have been good at hiding ancient revelations and data. That's one of their big systems of control, is they've hidden a lot of real history. Do they know something we don't know? I mean, I hate to start giving validity to this, but it's got to be looked at. Anything else, Donovan?
Well, yeah, if you look at the other planets in our solar system, they are also showing weird weather anomalies as we are. So,
tell you what, stay there. I want you to elaborate on that. Absolutely. All the major scientific institutions that measure it are confirming that since they've been getting accurate readings for more than half a century, there is the greatest movement in the poles they've ever seen. They normally just move around, a very small amount. Now they're massively drifting in the last couple years, and that drift is accelerating and causing all sorts of problems, especially with the geosynchronous satellites that are engaged in GPS. But the problem is they've only been measuring it accurately for half a century or so. Some measurements going back, more than 80 years. So we don't know if this is part of a normal cycle, but NASA and others are saying it's the sun that's the main driver of that, obviously. They must not have gotten the memo from the UN that the sun has no effect on the Earth. Let's talk to Donovan again. Donovan, you had another point you were going to make?
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to point out that if the rest of the planets in the solar system are experiencing, other weather anomalies similar, well, not similar to us, I guess you could say, but they are experiencing weather anomalies that it would be implicating something changing.
No, they are similar, and especially the moons of the gas giants. For the last 20 years or so, Their ice caps were melting. Mars ice caps were receding. Now they've been getting bigger again because the solar system's cooling off a bit. And because the sun is like a light bulb, it gets brighter sometimes and dimmer to simplify it. And that's why when I had David Rothschild on pushing carbon taxes, A, he denied they want carbon taxes, even though it's admitted. And B, I said, well, why are the other ice caps melting if the warming's only on other planets? Because, that's now 4 years ago. Since then, we know that the cooling has come back in and the warming's reversed. And he said, oh, that's because Jupiter and Saturn are closer to the sun than Earth. And I'm like, no, the order of the planets are Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, and then out from there with the gas giants all the way out, of course, to the tiny now non-planet, because they've delisted it, of Pluto out in the Kuiper Belt. But what's your other point?
Well, I guess it goes back to their idea of carbon tax and, saving the world of global warming. There's a couple of things I'd like to point out. One being that, let's say just for the sake of conversation, that their global warming is caused by CO2 emission and, they're going to save us all, right? Well, their plan of action is merely put a Band-Aid over a gunshot wound. You know what I mean? It's not going to do anything. We'd have to cease all fossil fuel consumption immediately. But
great point. I appreciate your call, Donovan. Look at the Kyoto Protocol. Look at the Kyoto Protocol. Look at it. It says that 167, if you want to be technical, third world countries, including China and India and many other greenhouse gas polluters, that's in quotes, they don't have to make any cuts. So if they restrict our energy here and make people pay more, well, what's left of our industry will leave even faster. And it doesn't cut back on emissions because our cleaner systems get turned off, and then their dirtier systems increase upkeep. The studies show it actually increase the amount of carbon dioxide. I mean, it's all a giant fraud from one end to another. It's a bunch of fear-mongering to sell global government and a global regime deciding who can have energy and who can't and how much you can use. It's feudalism, period. But we're taking calls right now until the bottom of the hour, and then I'm going to first get into magnetic pole shift. It's starting to happen, but how serious is it going to be? If there's a major pole shift, it will be cataclysmic. We'll be discussing that coming up at the bottom of the hour. Also, coming up at the bottom of the hour, people keep wanting to hear my take on pole shift. And I've done a lot of research on it. It is moving at a record rate since they've been recording it in the last half century. And if it does shift massively by thousands of miles, you're looking at serious calamity. There's no doubt serious cataclysm. I'm not saying that's coming or going to happen. But we know big asteroids and comets hit the planet. We know there are pole shifts. And it's just crazy that people predicted that there'd be a pole shift in 2012, and now it is moving around at a record pace. Pretty creepy. I mean, do the globalists know something that the ancients knew that they're not telling us? There are all these martial law preparations. You've got all the world economic collapse coming along at the same time. I don't know what's going on. I mean, they admittedly have magnetic weapons, earthquake-causing weapons. Secretary of the Army, William Cohen, 1997, admitted so in a press release, but it's classified. Tectonic weapons is what he calls them. Are the globalists doing this? We know they're manipulating a lot of the weather. It's just crazy. I'll talk about it coming up at the bottom of the hour. Ray McGovern, former top CIA analyst, will be with us in another 15 minutes, and I promise I'll get to all these mainstream media reports dealing with pole shift. People keep wanting me to talk about it. Paul Watson's written a big article, Pole Shift Threatens to Cause Weather Chaos. That's what NASA and people are saying. Fox News reporting they're having to recalibrate airport GPS. It's pretty strange. So I'm going to give you my take on it coming up. I'm going to spend the balance of the broadcast now dealing with pole shift. We live on an ever-changing world. We're hit by comets. We're hit by asteroids, solar flares. NASA admits if a direct solar flare ever points towards the Earth, it will blow out all of the satellites that are on the sunward side of the planet. That will cause serious issues. As we become more and more dependent on technology, pole movements or huge pole shifts, solar storms will affect us.